Hi, welcome back to Spirits of Asia. Yeah, I know I sound a little different. We've made some changes, and honestly, it's for the better. We listened to your feedback, we learned, and we grew. You'll also notice we've improved the visuals in our stories to give you an even better experience. Alright, let's jump into today's video. Have you ever seen a child standing alone at night in a place where they shouldn't be? Maybe at a train station after the last train has left, or on an empty street corner when all the shops are closed. Most people would assume the child is lost, maybe separated from their parents, and their first instinct would be to help. But what if I told you that in Japan, there are stories passed down through generations warning people to never ever follow a strange child at night, not because the child might be dangerous, but because the child might not be a child at all. Tonight, I'm going to share with you a disturbing true story from rural Japan about a man who learned this lesson the hard way. After the story, I'll explain what might have really happened from a cultural and spiritual perspective. If you're interested, stick around till the end. Tonight, we're heading deep into the Japanese countryside to uncover a story that still haunts the people who lived through it. This story takes place in a small mountain village in Gifu Prefecture, about 2 hours north of Nagoya. The village is one of those places that time seems to have forgotten. Narrow winding roads, wooden houses with slanted roofs, rice fields stretching out in every direction, and forests so thick and dark that even during the day, sunlight barely reaches the ground. Most of the residents are elderly. The younger generation left years ago to find work in the cities, leaving behind only their aging parents and grandparents to maintain what little remains of the old way of life. Our story centers around a man named Takeshi. Takeshi was 34 years old at the time and worked as a deliveryman for a regional logistics company. His job required him to drive long distances through rural areas, delivering packages to remote homes and businesses that larger companies refused to service. He didn't mind the work. In fact, he preferred it. The roads were quiet, the scenery was beautiful, and he enjoyed the solitude. It gave him time to think, time to listen to podcasts, and time to clear his head after long weeks of non-stop driving. One evening in late autumn, Takeshi was finishing up his last delivery of the day. It was already past 7 p.m., and the sun had set hours ago. The mountain roads were pitch black, except for the narrow beam of his headlights cutting through the darkness. He had one final package to drop off at a small farmhouse on the edge of the village, and then he could finally head home. The GPS on his phone guided him down a series of increasingly narrow roads until he reached a dirt path that barely fit his van. He slowed down, carefully navigating the uneven terrain, and eventually pulled up in front of a traditional Japanese farmhouse. The lights were on inside, and he could see the faint glow of a television flickering through the window. Takeshi grabbed the package, stepped out of the van, and walked up to the front door. He knocked twice and waited. A few moments later, an elderly woman opened the door. She smiled warmly and thanked him for making the trip so late at night. Takeshi bowed politely, handed her the package, and made his way back to the van. Just as he was about to climb back into the driver's seat, he heard something, a voice, soft, almost like a whisper, but clear enough to make him stop. He turned around and scanned the area. Nothing, just darkness and the faint rustling of leaves in the wind. He shrugged it off, assuming it was just his imagination playing tricks on him after such a long day. But then he heard it again. This time, it was louder. It sounded like a child's voice calling out from somewhere in the distance. Takeshi frowned. What would a child be doing out here at this hour? He stood there for a moment, listening carefully. The voice came again, and this time he could make out words. "Help me, please help me." Takeshi's heart sank. His first thought was that a child must be lost in the woods, maybe separated from their parents during a hike or something. He couldn't just ignore it. He grabbed his flashlight from the van and started walking toward the direction of the voice. The farmhouse was surrounded by dense forest on 3 sides, and the voice seemed to be coming from somewhere deep within the trees. Takeshi hesitated for a moment, but the voice called out again, more desperate this time. "Please, I'm scared. I can't find my way home." That was enough to push him forward. He stepped into the forest, shining his flashlight ahead of him, and began following the sound of the voice. The trees were thick, their branches tangled together overhead, blocking out what little moonlight there was. The ground was uneven, covered in roots and fallen leaves that crunched loudly under his feet. Takeshi called out as he walked. "Hello? Where are you? I'm coming to help you." "Don't worry," the voice responded immediately. "I'm here. Please hurry." Takeshi quickened his pace, pushing through the underbrush and ducking under low-hanging branches. He kept his flashlight trained ahead, scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. After a few minutes of walking, he finally saw something. Up ahead, standing in a small clearing, was a child. It was a little boy, maybe 6 or 7 years old, wearing a white shirt and dark shorts. His back was turned to Takeshi, and he was standing completely still, facing deeper into the forest. Takeshi felt a wave of relief wash over him. Thank God. He jogged over to the boy and called out, "Hey, are you okay? Are you lost?" The boy didn't respond. He didn't move. He just stood there, perfectly still, staring into the darkness ahead. Takeshi slowed down as he got closer, a strange feeling starting to creep up his spine. Something about the scene didn't feel right. The boy was too still, too quiet. And now that Takeshi was closer, he realized something else. The boy wasn't shivering. It was late autumn. The temperature had dropped significantly, and the boy was dressed in nothing but a thin shirt and shorts. He should have been freezing, but his posture was relaxed, almost unnaturally so. Takeshi stopped a few feet away from the boy and shone his flashlight directly at him. "Hey, kid, can you hear me?" Still no response. The boy remained motionless, his small figure silhouetted against the darkness of the forest. Takeshi's instincts were screaming at him now. Something was very wrong. He took a step back, and that's when the boy finally moved. Slowly, almost mechanically, the boy began to turn around. Takes breath caught in his throat. The boy's face was pale, almost white, like porcelain. His eyes were wide open, unblinking, and completely black. There were no pupils, no whites, just 2 empty voids staring directly at Takeshi. And then the boy smiled. It wasn't a normal smile. It was too wide, stretching across his face in a way that no human mouth should be able to move. "Hifu," Takeshi stumbled backward, his flashlight shaking in his hand. The boy took a step forward. "Come with me," the boy said, his voice flat and emotionless. "Come play with me." Takeshi didn't wait to hear more. He turned and ran. He crashed through the forest, branches whipping against his face, roots trying to trip him with every step. He could hear the boy behind him, not running, but walking. Slow, deliberate footsteps that somehow kept pace with him no matter how fast he ran. Takeshi's heart was pounding in his chest. His lungs burned. He didn't dare look back. He just kept running, praying that he would find his way back to the farmhouse, back to his van, back to safety. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he burst out of the forest and stumbled onto the dirt path where his van was parked. He threw himself into the driver's seat, slammed the door shut, and locked it. His hands were shaking so badly that he could barely get the key into the ignition. He glanced in the rearview mirror, expecting to see the boy standing at the edge of the forest. But there was nothing. Just darkness. Takeshi didn't waste any time. He started the engine and floored the gas pedal, kicking up dirt and gravel as he sped away from the farmhouse. He didn't stop driving until he was back on the main highway, surrounded by streetlights and other cars. Only then did he allow himself to breathe. The next day, Takeshi couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. He tried to convince himself that it was just his imagination, that he had been exhausted and his mind had played tricks on him. But deep down, he knew what he had seen. That boy was not human. That night, Takeshi went to a small izakaya near his apartment, hoping a drink would help calm his nerves. He sat at the bar nursing a beer when the man sitting next to him struck up a conversation. The man was older, maybe in his late 50s, with graying hair and a weathered face. They chatted for a while about work, life, the usual small talk. Eventually, Takeshi found himself telling the man about what had happened the night before. He expected the man to laugh it off or tell him he was crazy. But instead, the man's expression grew serious. "Where did this happen?" the man asked. Takeshi told him the name of the village. The man nodded slowly, as if he had heard this story before. "You saw a kodomo no yuurei," the man said quietly. "A child ghost." Takeshi felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you mean?" The man took a sip of his drink before continuing. "In rural Japan, there are stories about child spirits that lure people into the forest. They're usually the souls of children who died alone, lost, or abandoned. They wander at night, calling out for help, pretending to be lost. But if you follow them, they lead you deeper and deeper into the forest until you can't find your way back. Some people say they do it because they're lonely and want someone to play with. Others say they do it out of resentment, angry at the world for leaving them behind. Either way, the rule is the same. Never follow a strange child at night. Takeshi sat there in stunned silence, absorbing what the man had just told him. He wanted to dismiss it as superstition, as folklore meant to scare children into staying close to home after dark. But he couldn't shake the memory of those black eyes, that impossibly wide smile, and the way the boy had moved with such unnatural precision. The older man continued. My grandfather used to tell me stories about these spirits when I was young. He grew up in a village not far from where you were. Back in his day, before the war, children going missing in the mountains wasn't uncommon. Sometimes they would wander off during the day and get lost. Other times they would disappear at night and never be seen again. The villagers would form search parties, spend days combing through the forest, but they rarely found anything, just empty woods and silence. My grandfather said that the elders in his village believed some of those children never truly left. Their spirits remained, trapped between this world and the next, calling out to anyone who would listen. Takeshi swallowed hard. Did your grandfather ever see one? The man nodded slowly. Once. He was young, maybe 12 or 13 at the time. He was walking home late one night after helping a neighbor with their rice harvest. He heard a girl crying somewhere in the woods near his house. He said it sounded so real, so desperate, that he almost ran toward it. But his mother had warned him his entire life never to follow voices in the forest after dark. So he stopped, stood perfectly still, and listened. The crying continued for a few minutes, then suddenly stopped. A moment later, he heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps moving through the underbrush. He said it sounded like someone was walking toward him, but he couldn't see anyone. The footsteps got closer and closer, until they were right next to him. He could feel a presence standing there, breathing next to him. But when he looked, there was nothing. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the presence was gone. He ran home as fast as he could, and never walked that path at night again. Takeshi felt his skin crawl. To what happened to me? That wasn't just a coincidence. That boy, or whatever it was trying to lead me somewhere. The man nodded. Most likely, these spirits don't just appear randomly. They choose their targets carefully. People who are alone, people who are compassionate enough to want to help, people who don't know the stories. You were lucky you ran when you did. If you had followed him deeper into the forest, you might not have found your way back. Takeshi thought about how far he had already walked before he saw the boy. He had been so focused on following the voice that he hadn't paid attention to where he was going. If he had gone any deeper, he might have become completely disoriented. The older man finished his drink and stood up to leave. Takeshi Runwijile, pulling for help in the woods at night. Don't go. Just leave. No matter how real it sounds, no matter how much your instincts tell you to help, just walk away. It's not worth the risk. Takeshi thanked the man and sat alone at the bar for a while longer, trying to process everything. He decided that night that he would never take another delivery route that required him to drive through remote mountain villages after dark. It wasn't worth it. But the story doesn't end there. About a week later, Takeshi received a phone call from his supervisor. There had been a complaint. The elderly woman at the farmhouse, the one he had delivered the package to that night, had called the company to report that Takeshi had left her property in a hurry and seemed distressed. She was worried that something had happened and wanted to make sure he was okay. Takeshi's supervisor asked him if everything was all right, and Takeshi, not wanting to sound insane, simply said that he had felt unwell that night and needed to leave quickly. He apologized for any concern he had caused. His supervisor seemed satisfied with the explanation and told him not to worry about it. But then his supervisor said something that made Takeshi's blood run cold. By the way, the woman also mentioned that after you left, she heard a child crying in the forest behind her house. She said it went on for about an hour. She thought maybe a neighbor's kid had gotten lost. But when she called her neighbors the next morning, none of them had any children. Strange, right? Takeshi didn't respond. He just hung up the phone and sat there in silence. The boy was still there, still calling out, still waiting for someone else to follow. Over the following weeks, Takeshi became obsessed with researching the area where he had encountered the spirit. He scoured old newspaper archives, local history websites, and community forums, looking for any mention of missing children or unexplained disappearances in that region. What he found only deepened the mystery. According to several sources, the village and the surrounding forest had a long history of strange occurrences. In the 1960s, a 7-year-old boy had wandered away from his family's farm and disappeared. Search parties looked for weeks but never found a trace of him. In the 1980s, a young girl went missing during a school field trip to the nearby mountain trails. She was last seen walking toward the forest alone. Her body was never recovered. And in the early 2000s, a tourist from Tokyo vanished while hiking through the area. His car was found parked at a trailhead, but he was never seen again. The local police eventually closed the case, concluding that he had likely gotten lost and succumbed to the elements, though his body was never found. But what disturbed Takeshi the most was a forum post he found written by a former resident of the village. The post was from several years ago, and the person described an experience almost identical to Takeshi's. They had been walking home late one night when they heard a child calling for help. They followed the voice into the forest and encountered a small boy standing alone in a clearing. The boy had turned around, and the person described the same pale face, the same black eyes, the same unnaturally wide smile. They had run, just like Takeshi, and barely made it out. The post ended with a warning. If you're ever in that area and you hear a child at night, don't go, just don't. Takeshi felt a chill run through him as he read those words. He wasn't the only one. This had happened before, and it would probably happen again. He wanted to do something, to warn others, but what could he do? Report it to the police? They'd think he was crazy. Post about it online? People would dismiss it as a made-up story. So he did the only thing he could. He avoided that area entirely. He requested that his supervisor reassign any deliveries in that region to someone else, citing personal reasons. His supervisor agreed without asking too many questions. Months passed, and Takeshi tried his best to move on. He threw himself into his work, focused on other routes, and did his best not to think about what had happened that night. But every now and then, late at night, when he was lying in bed, he would hear it, the faint, almost like a distant echo, but unmistakable. The child's voice calling out, "Please help me. I'm scared. I can't find my way home." He would sit up, heart pounding, and listen, but the voice would fade, swallowed up by the silence of the night. He never knew if it was real or just his mind playing tricks on him. Either way, it was enough to keep him awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, wondering if somewhere out there in that dark forest, the boy was still waiting, still calling, still searching for someone to follow him into the darkness. Now I want to take a moment to talk about the cultural and spiritual context behind this story, because it helps explain what Takeshi might have encountered in Japanese folklore. There are many types of child spirits, known as kodomo no yuurei. These spirits are believed to be the souls of children who died under tragic or traumatic circumstances. Unlike adult spirits, which are often tied to specific locations or objects, child spirits are thought to wander freely, searching for something they lost in life: companionship, safety, or simply a way home. One of the most common traits of these spirits is their ability to mimic the behavior of a lost child. They cry, they call for help, they appear vulnerable and afraid. This is intentional. It preys on the natural human instinct to protect and help children. But once someone follows them, the spirit leads them deeper and deeper into isolated areas, often forests or mountains, until the person becomes completely lost. Some versions of the legend say that the spirit is lonely and wants someone to stay with them forever. Others say the spirit is angry and resentful, seeking revenge on the living for abandoning them in death. In Takeshi's case, the boy he encountered displayed several classic signs of a kodomo no yuurei: the voice calling for help, the pale appearance, the black eyes, and the unnatural smile. These are all described in traditional accounts of child spirit encounters. The fact that the boy was standing in a clearing, facing away, is also significant. In many ghost stories, spirits are said to appear with their backs turned as a way to lure people closer. It's only when they turn around that their true nature is revealed. Another important detail is the location. Rural mountain villages in Japan, especially those surrounded by dense forests, have long been considered spiritually active areas. The Japanese concept of Satoyama refers to the border area between human settlements and untamed nature. This boundary is believed to be a place where the physical world and the spirit world overlap. It's not uncommon for people living in these areas to report strange occurrences, from unexplained sounds to full apparitions. What makes Takeshi's story even more chilling is that it wasn't an isolated incident. As he discovered through his research, other people had experienced the same thing in that exact location. This suggests that the spirit, or spirits, have been active in that area for decades, possibly longer. Whether it's the ghost of one specific child or multiple spirits drawn to that location is unclear. But one thing is certain, that forest is not a place you want to be after dark. Yeah. So what should you do if you ever find yourself in a similar situation? If you're in a rural area, especially in Japan or other parts of Asia, and you hear a child calling for help at night, follow these guidelines. First, do not go toward the voice. No matter how real it sounds, no matter how much your instincts tell you to help, stay where you are. Second, if you see a child standing alone in an unusual place late at night, do not approach them. Observe from a distance, and if something feels off, trust your instincts and leave. Hifom. If the child turns around and you see anything unusual, black eyes, an unnatural smile, a pale face, run, don't look back. Don't try to communicate, just get to safety as quickly as possible. And finally, if you make it out, tell someone. Share your story, warn others. The more people who know about these spirits, the fewer people will fall victim to them. Takeshi learned this lesson the hard way. He was lucky. He trusted his instincts and ran when he realized something was wrong. But not everyone is so fortunate. So if you ever find yourself walking alone at night and you hear a voice calling out from the darkness, remember this story. Remember Takeshi. And whatever you do, never follow strange children at night.